Good evening. The news gang is here, fully constituted and ready to go. On the show tonight, did someone rig in Mariga? Cries of foul play in Kibra, and the real game has not even kicked off. To the Mao who is backing the wrong tree there. We look at the politics, the facts, the fiction, and a forest complex with one simple need: conservation. Also on the show tonight, the burden of a referendum. Punguza Mizigo gets a win and a loss. What does the future hold? And what about BBI? We'll also have the kicker, the memo, the punchline, the take, and the angle. But first, let's begin with some of those sentiments that we've been hearing from politicians about the Mao.
The truth also is that the cabinet has not made a decision on eviction of anybody, neither does the government of Kenya believe, under the Jubilee administration, that citizens should be evicted.
The same group persuaded Kenyans in 2013, I included, so then we can have a government that will address the issue of Mao. The same people I included 2017, we persuaded again the same Kalenjin to vote for this government to sort out Mao. So we want to again persuade the same people to vote for us in 2022, so then we can come and sort out this issue. Is it not a hypocrisy?
Wow, Linus, deja vu all over again. This really sounds very familiar.
Very familiar, and it's gone on for many years. We can describe this correctly as a very sickening game. Sickening in the sense that it's not about the environment. It's about politics. Mao Forest.
Neither is it about the people.
Neither is it about the people.
Yeah.
These are the same people, and you know, I tend to agree with some of the sentiments, especially by Kutunyi. They've been there. They've done this before, only across different regimes. In 2008-9, this conversation was on, only that it was under the National Rainbow Coalition administration of Mwai Kibaki. Then the second term of the term, the same conversations. And I'll never forget how one member of parliament, Paul Sang, told his constituents that there is no link between
the forest
and rain. He said, this is how they have trivialized the issue. This is not about the people. This is not about the forest. This is called selfish politics.
Wow. And Linus, Francis, you speak to these people quite a lot. Like, what is this about? I mean, we've seen this when John Mishuki was in environment, and that time Raila was prime minister. We have seen it in phase one when Tobiko, I think it was actually in the ministry. And now we are seeing the same script repeating itself. Actually, the Mao predates even the people that I have talked about.
Absolutely. And I listened to Senator Murkomen say that the CS environment is insubordinating the president, that there is no cabinet decision on the Mao reclamation or the evictions. What I felt, or how I interpreted that to mean, was it's pushing the president to say, no, he's not insubordinating me, or he is insubordinating me. For an operation of that magnitude to go on with a multi-agency team like the one constituted to deal with the Mao reclamation in the second phase, you cannot tell me that President Uhuru Kenyatta has no idea about what is happening in Mao or what is expected to happen in Mao, number one. Number two, I would not think that the government does not know. Actually, there's a soundbite, probably we should have cut it. The senator saying, we are the government. So when he says, we are the government, who is Natembeya? Is he not part of the government? Actually, the government representative in the entire Rift Valley. The cabinet secretary in charge of, environment, Keriako Tobiko, is part of the government. Actually, he sits in the highest decision-making organ in this country, the cabinet. So it is clear the government knows what is happening in Mao. However, the politics will look at it differently, that the government is not aware, because even the government, as is constituted, one of its primary origins is the Mao politics.
Jamila.
Yes, I'd like, before we continue, you've spoken about Tobiko being in the cabinet and questions arising about who is speaking for. I'd like us to listen to a soundbite by George Natembeya and also Minister Tobiko before we carry on.
We are not politicians. We are not interested in politics.
Of course, people are going to make a lot of noise as usual. We can choose to listen to that noise and then face the consequences in another 5 years, because you will have a piece of land but you will have no water. So that if there is a small price to pay, you should be able to pay that price for the sake of the wealth of everybody.
Natembeya is doing his job in accordance to the appointment that I made. I am the one responsible.
He has clearly said that he is the one responsible.
And it really is, by the way, because he is cabinet secretary in charge of that docket. In fact, there is no requirement that the president should be involved. I mean, we have seen, for example, Professor Magoha dealing with his own CBC things and all the fights he has. Everybody has, you know, the way they usually say, kila mtu apambane na hali yake. Every cabinet secretary has his docket or her docket, and they deal with it. The president, of course, would expect to be updated, and they keep him posted, they inform him, because this is a huge thing that might have many implications that could even be political. So the president obviously would have to be kept abreast, but there is no requirement for him to give a direct order or for the cabinet to sit and discuss. Those actually the things that usually happen just so that there is good order, but there's really no strict legal requirement. But be that as it may, I think it is interesting if we were to look at what is the politics, because we've seen this before and the same tones we hear. Right now there is a dimension, Yvonne, of local politics, that is local Narok politics. There's a dimension of when you hear, for example, how this usually happens, people like Murkomen, for example, he comes from Elgeyo Marakwet, but somehow that's very far from this now place we are talking about, but you will find him there. You find people who come from the North Rift trooping down there. So there is a connection between the Mau and the larger politics of the Kalenjin nation, and to some degree national politics.
And indeed, and that is perhaps due to how people were settled in the Mau. And I remember Jeff Koinange asking this question yesterday to his panelists: how did people get into the forest? Like, you know, how do you, I mean, I think the same when we're asking for riparian land, how did you build on a river? In the first place. And it's the same thing, how did people get into the forest? And the truth is, a lot of the big politicians and the big names we hear in this country, right up to people who are former presidents, own land in these areas. And then what they do is you get big tracts of land, and then they surround them with little pockets of ordinary mwananchi, who then become the sort of buffer or a pawn, or a pawn in the game, and are then used to do that. In fact, in just this phase 2, Natembeya is on record as saying 1,274 titles will be cancelled. And one of the things, just for people to understand, okay, it's the same government that's giving titles, but we all know the drama around title deeds and, you know, the National Land Commission and the Ministry of Lands, and how, you know, there's been some foul play. But for someone to have bought land inside the forest, it would need to have been degazetted. So removed from the list of protected areas as forest land. A survey would need to be done. Pieces of land would have to be carved out, allotment letters, and then title deeds. Are we aware that any of this land was degazetted as forest land, then surveyed, and then given to these persons? So it really is, for me, I think the politics is the fact that politicians own big tracts of land. They are the big losers in the event of
there's something about
and so now this becomes
that I think we should talk about the people. You say they're the buffers, the ones who are now wamezunguka hapo, they're the little pockets. And if Robert can allow me, one of our reporters, Enoch Sikolia, went in there today and he spoke to a couple of those people. There are two different men he spoke to. One who was forced to leave, who was had to leave with his family, and one who said he was not going to leave. And you listen to them even being asked about whether they have deeds or any allotment letters. This is what they had to say. Robert, can you listen to the gentleman who has had to leave the Mau? Yeah, well, the soundbite is still coming. And what is interesting is that he says he had a letter. He says, nilikuwa na barua, but we are tired of being harassed. That's why we are leaving. And then there's a second gentleman who says, where will I go? Mi nitabakia hapa, hakuna mahali naenda. And that's really difficult.
There's an answer to that question. You're asking a question of where do I go? The fact about a majority of people who are in the Mau is that they come from somewhere. They come from Bomet. They come from Transmara, where I come from. They come from, some come from as far as Baringo. Mau forest, the invasion, doesn't have original indigenous people except the Ogiek.
The Ogiek, yeah.
The rest of the narratives are pure lies. This is an encroachment into the forest. These people come from somewhere. I think one of the things that one can do is try and follow once they are moved and see whether where they end up. But they'll go back to their homes. And this is the point I'm making, Joe, here on the issue of the Mau forest. Mau forest is the most politicized ecological feature in this country. And literally in the sense that the people who are there also act as political weapons. In Narok County, for example, where I come from, that is a very important voting bloc. They swing the vote. And that is why you'll find that the politicians look at the press conferences, for example. Who is in those press conferences? You'll not see certain politicians because this is too hot. This is what, 40,000, 100,000 people that you're talking about. These are votes that created some of those offices. So they are weapons. On the national scale, why we see Murkomen coming there is because of simply, we are government. He said that.
Yeah.
And by we, he meant the Kalenjin community. We voted for you, so give us what we want. If it's these settlements in the forest, we voted for it. This is the government. And they've
used that very effectively also to rally public sympathy in the larger community, where you will say, look what these people are doing to our people down there in the Mau, even though those people might not be many. And Francis, before you come in, there is this thing, and Linus is the lawyer in the room, but the lawyers usually like to say there's something they call nemo dat quod non habet, which is basically you cannot give what you do not have. So if the original title in itself was fraudulent, that it did not have any status in law, it matters little that you got it in a way that you thought was legal. But if the whole thing was irregular ab initio from the start, then it means that really what you have, as the government has been saying, is a piece of paper. I mean, sad as it sounds, but it really is just a worthless piece of paper.
It is sad, and Gashuri, I think we should now listen to that soundbite, because we're talking about these people who say they have pieces of paper that they are laying claim to the land, but it's actually worthless.
Before you weigh in.
Yes, let's listen to that soundbite now.
Shamba yangu huku nilimaliza. Nyumbani penye nilitoka.
Ulitoka wapi?
Nilitoka Chemanere.
Chemanere iko pande gani?
Iko Bomet County. Nilimaliza huko, sasa ni kuenda tu mpaka saa hii vile mnaniona hivi, nimeamua kuenda tu hao watoto wamechoka. Sasa nitaweza lala mahali popote tu.
Now that gentleman is willing to leave, but there's and he says he comes from Bomet. Yes, he says
he has a specific village that he's going back to.
Yes. But there's another gentleman who says he has nowhere to go, he's not leaving. I don't know if you have that soundbite, Robert. Yes.
Siwezi ondoka kwa sababu sina mahali pengine. Hapa ni nyumbani. Tutangoja tu wafanye vile wanataka. Sababu hatuna mahali popote tutaenda. Mali yetu yote ilishia hapa.
So we have these two instances, Gashuri, wala anasema mi hakuna mali naenda, uya naenda. And in fact, as we are talking, I think, Robert, you can start running some of the pictures we have of Mau, of people actually living in droves.
Yeah. But you see, there's something else that we also need to deal with. In 2013-2017, the Jubilee leaders then, TNA and Europe in 2013 and now Jubilee in 2017, they went to these places in search of votes. At that time, they knew it was a forest. I would imagine they did. That time they knew these guys were settled in a forest.
There were lots of trees, it was a forest.
Yeah, there were many trees, but there there were also people who were living there, and those people were registered voters. Actually, the schools that we are talking about, the 15 or thereabout schools, were polling stations. So if at that time those people were there and the government knew they were there and they were not evicted at that time, so even now probably they would lay some claim to what they hold, because they would argue, when you came to look for our vote here, we were legally here, but now once we have delivered that which you are looking for, you are now telling we are illegally here. So you probably would understand to some extent. However, at the heart of it is conservation of the Mau forest. That is one thing that we must not lose at all. So what needs to be done is to ask the hard questions. If these people are in the forest, they encroached into the forest, where did they come from? Who facilitated them to get there? Once we have dealt with those two questions, now it's working backwards. So you can say these people were facilitated by ABCD from a certain area to come here. So deal with it from that point.
And I think they've been given the 60-day, I think they've been given 60 days grace period to move out. And right now we already have the officers from the Kenya Forest Service already camping in those areas as people move out. And remember, a few days ago they had said those schools need to be closed, 15 of them. And then a day later again, Natembea changed his stand and said, no, the schools remain open because of the exams. And someone wonders why these schools, which had even gotten funding from the government to a tune of about 60 million shillings, can be said to be just education centers.
And I have a question about that, because so they want the schools to remain open, but the people to leave the forest. But the children go to those schools. So if they leave, then the schools stand closed and empty. But here's the thing about compensation, and this is what the Kenya Water Towers Agency says, that no, there will be no compensation. This is because Section 61 of the Trust Land Act provides that a person who unlawfully occupies trust land in any manner whatsoever shall be guilty of an offense. And then it goes on to say, however, you know, in keeping with international best practice, the government may consider what they call ex gratia assistance.
Or may not.
Or may not, yes. Thanks for reading that. It actually says may.
I noticed that.
Yes, I saw that. Yes.
Like
may or may not.
There's no obligation.
Yes, there's no obligation on their part. And I think this is the issue about, you know, compensation and it being done in a humane manner and perhaps not kicking them out in the middle of the night. The 60 days that they have to do this. But the reason, Francis, you were saying that they would have to walk back and say, who bought this land, who facilitated their move in there, that is where the political issue is, because those people are known, those people are high-ranking politicians, businessmen, businesses that are running their tea factories, logging that is being done to a great extent. So touching that is a live wire that would have some serious political and legal ramifications.
And it explains why today the government would use those schools as polling stations and tomorrow come back to evict, because there's really never been real political will to deal with what was clearly an illegality from the first
by the state and by some powerful.
I want to just talk about something that Francis had mentioned, which is Mau is actually an ecological issue. It's about the conservation of the forest. Not too long ago, if you went to the Mara River and saw
twice
this year, not too long ago, this year, honestly, there was more saliva coming out of politicians' mouths than there was water in the Mara River. Seriously, it was that bad. And I just want us to go back to the files and look at these 3 clips, which are a perfect illustration of the very, very cruel games that are being played here. And if, Robert, we could see the fundraiser, the famous fundraiser.
25th November 2009.
Yeah, I don't remember who did that story.
The president speaking.
She's now no longer in the newsroom, but I remember her,
okay. Let's see.
During that fundraiser, Linus, if you remember, that was President Uhuru Kenyatta at that time arriving, to great jubilation by members of parliament, especially from the Rift Valley, who attended that function. And you can trace back the history. That time, former Prime Minister Raila Odinga was spearheading the Mau conservation, and at that time, phase one. At that time, he was quote unquote the big enemy of the Rift Valley leaders at that time, Remember, he was Prime Minister. Uhuru Kenyatta was Deputy Prime Minister. Kalonzo Musyoka was Vice President. In that function, Kalonzo did not attend, but he was represented by Mutula Kilonzo, the late. And there were still murmurs whether President Uhuru Kenyatta would attend that fundraiser or he wouldn't. In fact, there is talk that he defied President Mwai Kibaki at that time and attended this function.
And the Prime Minister at that time.
And his sentiments were clear that day, that you cannot brutalize the present to protect the future. And the whole question was about people who had been evicted and were camping by the roadside. I even remember that day they raised 5 million shillings to assist those people.
There's another day I want to remind you now, and just going back to the files again, and this was Mara Day in Narok, and the guest of honor was the Honorable Deputy President William Ruto.
2016?
Yes. If we could just listen to him saying people should move out of the forest, and we say that vis-a-vis the position taken by his allies right now.
It is as if silent. He's not speaking about
it. It is as if this never happened. Let's listen to the DP.
Ya misitu lazima tuhakikishe kwamba inasimamiwa sawa sawa, na hakuna mwananchi anapaswa kuwa ndani ya msitu. Kila mtu lazima atoke, na tumesema hiyo kwa sababu mimi mwenyewe ndio nilikuja nalo hapa. Mimi mwenyewe ndio nilikuja hapa nikasema anybody who has gone beyond the cut line must get out. Na hiyo kazi ilifanyika. Wananchi wengi ambao walikuwa wameingia msitu wametoka. Ile kazi ambayo bado iko pale, sisi kama serikali tutaketi chini na county government na wale wote ambao wanahusika, tuhakikishe ya kwamba tunalinda misitu, na kama kuna wale wamefanya encroachment pia na wao tutawapangia vile wataondoka, ndio Kenya hii tuweze kuishi kwa njia ya taratibu.
Now this is the game. This is the game here, guys. It depends on who the audience is. This was a Maasai audience in Narok town, and so the Maasai audience obviously wants to hear people moving out of the forest because of the water that is not
them
working.
living downstream.
Downstream. Now, because of the Kalenjin factor in Narok politics, this is the reciprocal language of the Maasai leaders when it comes to addressing the Kalenjin community. And I want us to just listen to the Narok governor, Samuel Tunai, in a campaign rally. Just, we have that, Robert? Yes.
Ati nikikubali kutoa Kimsi Kisuko Mau Forest, sasa mimi nitakuwa mzuri kwa Maasai. Hiyo inawezekana? Hiyo inawezekana? Hiyo ndio sababu mnasikia hii mambo yote ya kelele. Na nimesema nilichaguliwa mchana, nilishinda mchana, wameenda kotini wameshindwa, jamii ya Kipsigis hawataguswa siku moja kama Tunai ni gavana.
Saini usiku.
No, but it's an interesting thing, Linus, that you are beginning to touch on, because I was talking about the national picture, but there's also a local intra-Narok question regarding the Maasai and the Kalenjin communities vis-a-vis the Mao thing. I think it would be interesting to hear what that is about.
Yep, that's right. I'll give you about the entire political geography of Narok. First, you have about 4 constituencies that are heavily populated, mixed between Maasai and Kalenjin. There is Kilgoris, where I come from. There is a Murwadikir, which was hived off Kilgoris, and it's entirely a Kalenjin Kipsigis constituency. Narok South and Narok West. In politics, if you are in those areas, you need to play ball with the Kalenjin vote. Now, the bigger picture, becoming governor. Governor Samuel Tunai got the majority, if not almost nearly the entire Kalenjin vote. That is how it decides. And that is why you see...
He has a deputy who is...
he has a deputy who is Kipsigis.
Yeah.
Now, what this has meant is, for some of those MPs, Mao is a very tricky issue. If you are thinking of re-election, there are a few things that you will not say. You cannot, for example, talk about people moving out of the Mao. That's why you've not seen...
where they will go, so they will not be a factor.
Yes. That's why you've not seen a lot of the elected MPs from Narok County, Maasai MPs.
Actually, only Senator Ledama Ole Kina has been spearheading this. And in fact, what you say, resonates very well with what I heard Senator Aaron Cheriot say in Kericho last weekend, no, the weekend before. He was saying that there's a systematic plan to deal with the numbers, the political numbers in Narok County for succession politics as a governor in Narok County. And that then explains the numbers that you're talking about here.
Wow, I think we need to take a break.
We do.
Then we'll be right back with more of those, including Punguza BBI. Oh, Punguza Mizigo.
Nice one.
When we return.